when it was time to leave the camp, we had so many decisions to make. And before we left, we had just tried to decide, okay, will we use some land that we have just bought out in Banner Elk, or will we use our Montreat house, and we'll go and live in one of those places when we come back from our volunteer event we were going to. And we were just kind of, let's see what God would have us do. And actually, we took some time at Montreat that Easter before no one knew we were leaving except us, none of the kids or anybody. And we were saying, what are we going to do after the camp? And first we were deciding we had to either sell our land in Banner Elk or we had to sell our house at Montreat so we would have a place to live in a year-round home. So after much discussion and prayer and so forth, we decided that God didn't care which place we lived, that we could serve anywhere we went. And a realtor in Montreat said, listen, if you want to sell your house, I can sell it for you in a week. And you won't even, he didn't even charge us. He said, put it on the bulletin board in Montreat. Everything's just going hotcakes right now. So that summer we put it on the Montreat. We put it on the bulletin board at Montreat. We sold the house there, and it turned out just the perfect thing. We saw in the paper that you could buy a package house. You could design it yourself, and it could be however many square feet would be so much per square foot. And you could design a package, and they would bring the material to your lot. So we got real interested in that and actually bought it. And then we found out that a package is not a kit. And that was something we honestly thought it was going to be a kit in which the pieces were cut, but they weren't. So Barrett built the house. He was the construction man, and I was the contractor. And we worked together the whole time, but I never hit one nail. I can never say I helped to build the house in that kind of way. But we had a good time, and a lot of people would volunteer. A lot of our friends would say, I'm going to give you a day or whatever. And, you know, you can't discount how much help we had. We had a lot of help. While we were building the house, we lived in a little trailer right beside the building. And we got this cheap trailer. It had once been good, but anyway, one bedroom little thing, and we lived in that, and until it kept it for a good while. In fact, when Ellen and Peter later years, the next year came home with their new baby, they lived in that trailer while they were building the house. We loved that little trailer, but at the end, we said anybody that wants it can have it as long as they'll take it out of here. So that's how we got rid of it. Kirk graduated from college the very same semester that we were building the house. And so he came and lived in the little trailer with us for a while. And he did help us with the finishing. And then later he lived in the house while we were gone on our volunteer trip. So Barrett designed the house to be using passive solar and partly a brick floor, and we tried to have it as ecologically good as we could from the things we'd been learning. And we heated with a little fireplace. We heated with wood alone for the first 15 years. But we did have to, for insurance purposes, you have to put in a backup heater anyway. So we had a backup heater with propane that we started gradually using after we'd been here for many years. We went to Habitat for Humanity actually when we had applied with the Presbyterian Church to do some volunteer things. Habitat had been our second choice. I've thought of that many times because it's always been our very first choice since then. But we went down to America. Habitat had just been in business for a short time, and they were still very much on the starting age as a business. For instance, the first time we were there, while we were there, we sent out newsletters and actually folded and stamped and everything by hand and put them in zip code order and all that. But while we were there, they progressed to the point of having, that done by professionals. But it was in the early stages, and we met the founders, and we had a lot to say about things, and we just absolutely loved there. One of the best things for us was that Barrett could build and I could work in the office, and we were not in charge of anything. And we both just loved that we would just get up every morning and go to work. We walked to work, which was policy. We had a devotional every morning at 7:30. All the people who worked there gathered for the devotional, and then we went straight to work in our various places. And there were about 100 volunteers there at that time, so we made lots of friends. We had to have more money to live there for 6 months, and we sold a lot in Monterey that Mama had and no one had built on. And that sale of that little lot supported us while we were at Habitat. One of the things that we really liked at Habitat for Humanity and at Koinonia was that here were all these people volunteering from all places, all parts of the country and some from other parts of the world. We went by first names. We didn't talk about what did you do at home, and that was kind of a no-no to say I was a doctor or so we worked with people. We didn't know what their past was. We were just all there working together, and that was just a wonderful experience. I wish everybody could have an experience like that where there's no status involved. One of the nice things in Americus was that we were just 9 miles from Plains, Georgia. Jimmy Carter was there. Most Sundays he taught Sunday school, and the public was invited. He had a little trick that if you wanted to have your picture made with him, you had to stay for church. And of course we did. But we went to many of his Sunday school classes and just loved it. And then on Sunday evenings we would go out to Koinonia, which I could tell a whole story about. But Koinonia had been there since the 40s, and it's a wonderful place where people had done political things and done things to help the racial problem and all way before it was popular. And our time there did make us both become much more politically aware and involved than we'd ever been. We came home from Habitat in June of 1986, and our point was to finish our house before we took on anything else. So we still didn't have a job, and we were just perfectly happy because the house was almost finished, and we had a lot to put up the inside walls and things like that. During that time, we started looking around at jobs that were available in the area that would meet some needs, and we went to put in our applications and were accepted to work at Yellow Mountain Enterprises, which was and is a program for developmentally disabled adults. Work that we had never done, but it sounded something like we really would like. Our folks were from severely handicapped to just minimally handicapped, but they were all adults, and their ages were from 18 all the way to 75. But we had so many plans for things that they could do. Each person, we tried to see what is your level and what could you do to an adult type job. This was very important. So when we were down at the church before we ever moved, we came up with the idea of making Christmas bows for Christmas wreaths. Then when we got to the other building, there were, as far as jobs, we had people that were placed in McDonald's. Then we had other people that learned how to wrap silverware. Barrett was very much interested in having a yard crew. They would go to people's houses and clear out and pick up sticks and spread mulch, things like that. And so that became a real good business too. We left there in '96, and after 10 years. But it was quite wonderful to work with those folks. They were so appreciative, so kind, and we just learned a lot from them. Whenever the grandkids were here for any period of time, I loved to have them help decorate the house or the yard with some of the creative things. And so they painted inside the house. Barrett helped them build birdhouses one time. They all designed their own, and he cut some wood for them. But inside they did stools for the kitchen that I still use. And it was great fun. One year for Mother's Day, I was given a book on how to build a pond. I had been saying I'd love to have one of those ponds in the backyard, and we had all these big rocks that were naturally ours. But anyway, a year later, Barrett and the kids that were available all helped to build a pond, and it's been about 17 years, and that pond is still just perfect. We haven't had any problems with it, and I had fish in it for a long time, but anyway, it's a special place that I love to sit, and Barrett and I did love to just sit in front of the pond. I've always had a passion for flowers. My dad grew them, and then when we moved up here, there's so many wildflowers, and I like to grow flowers. And so getting this yard, the right kind of soil in, and they're getting the rocks out and all has been quite a project. Barrett always helped, but he left the flower part to me, and I just did it the way I wanted to, and it was never the same 2 years in a row. A lot of perennials, but mostly try to have some wildflowers. Our Thanksgiving traditions just grew kind of on its own. Back when we lived at the camp, a lot of times, if there wasn't anybody coming to the camp, we would have the Gilmer side. Barrett's family would come up and stay in the lodge, and we'd have Thanksgiving together. And lots of times we had Mom and Daddy, and of course the Fortunes, if they were in town, were with us, and they're Tony's folks. So it just gradually grew until their children and their children and their children. We're now in the fourth generation, literally, of people that come. And it grew in size and in activity. We've added a lot of things and cut out a lot of things. We've had times when we learned to dance and different things we do, a lot of crafts. And now we just mainly let the families come and figure out what they want to do. We do still have yoga in the mornings, and we have a time that we get together and have a thankful time for those who want to. But it's just grown until we have cousins that we all call each other cousins. We just have a huge family, and it's just a wonderful time. There's no pressure on anyone to come, but those who come pay their own way. So it's just really a fun time that's, most of us just love it to death. The camp is such a wonderful place for all of us. I'm trying not to say special too much, but honestly, my kids and their kids, and other cousins and nephews and nieces and grandkids have gone to camp, have worked at the camp, whatever. So when we have Thanksgiving there, for many people it's like a homecoming, and it really is a great family reunion. We went to the beach a lot of times, but we didn't go every summer after the kids got bigger. But there were so many times when the grandkids were growing up and getting their own experiences at the beach, and it's just another cousin thing where everybody just enjoys being together. after retirement, I had taught Sunday school a lot of times, but Barrett had never been free to do so. But we took on the middle school Sunday school class at our church, and we had so much fun. And we had retreats with them. We took them out to our camp. We took them out to other places for retreats, and we went to New York City for the Peace Conference. And it was just a lot of fun for all of us, and we tried to feel young. Well, after Thanksgiving, for many years, we would have our Christmas time with our children and grandchildren. So, because they were all going to be at home at their places, and so we would draw names, draw one name, and it had to always be something used and a real inexpensive amount. And it was a lot of fun. And we did it, Kirk and Chrissy would send things when they couldn't come and all that. It got to be where people, as the years went on, people had their own Christmas things, and we didn't try to do Christmas here after Thanksgiving. But it was really wild, and we had it both here at my house and down at Ellen's. At some point, we started going down to Meg and Adrian's house in Elk Park for Christmas. They had more room, and we'd go down there and spend the night and see the children get up and have Santa Claus and all that. And that grew too until cousins and aunts and uncles and different people went different years. But for years, Barrett and I went and would get up, spend the night on Christmas Eve, and get up on Christmas morning and have that together with whoever was there. Loved it. After we retired, we continued volunteering for Habitat for Humanity. And Barrett actually went for 4 years. He went every day, 6 days a week, and worked for Habitat. It was at a time when we had no paid staff. It was still in the early stages, really, of developing a local habitat, and he loved it. So he did that, but he always said, when we get a paid staff person to direct this, I'm retiring from that. But he loved it. And I did a lot of the volunteer stuff too, because there was no secretary, and I wrote thank you notes and all that. We still just continued our belief in that program. I got into a kind of a second career after retirement. I finally got to do a lot of writing. I had done some writing all my life because I loved it, and my sister and brother loved it, my dad loved it. But I had worked for a newspaper several times. But at this point, I was actually asked by the head of Grandfather Home to write the history of Grandfather Home. And it took tons of research, a whole year, but I was hired to do the book, and I loved it. And I found out that was one of my favorite things to do. When I was writing books, they were all local history. This was before emails, hard to believe, but Especially the first books, we didn't even have a computer. I was so thrilled to buy a word processor, which is kind of between a typewriter and a computer, to write that book on. The first book that I wrote was the Child Now Before Us, and it was about a children's home that had been an orphanage locally here, and it was the 97 years of their history. I had a wonderful time doing it. I got to meet a lot of the former children, and I got a lot of trips in because I'd have to go and actually visit people as well as talk on the phone, and keep all kind of tabs of what I was doing. But it was a good pay, and it was very well received. The home paid me for the book, and then they had 10,000 printed, and they gave them away to the former children or other people that they wanted to know about it. The second book I wrote was The Panorama of Caring, and it's about 2 hospitals in Avery County that were both ending, one in Van Ryck and one in Crossnore, and they had been here for almost 100 years, and they were both ending and combining to a new hospital in Linville. So because of that, the hospital board asked me to write their history, and so when they had the grand opening of the new hospital, they sold the books. The third book I wrote was Our Hearts Belong, which is the story of Holston Camp, where we lived and worked and so forth. My son George did the layout, and we spent many hours doing this book. It was a lot of fun, and of course it was sentimental to me too because I love the camp so much. But I'm so glad that we were able, in all of these cases, to just preserve some of the things that would have not been kept if I hadn't written the book. So that always gave me this great feeling of really preserving some history. This book is about Marjorie Rawlings in the mountains, and if you don't know who she was, she used to be a very famous writer. She wrote The Yearling, and I was very interested in her. When I first came here, I found out that she had once spent a summer in Van Ryck, and when I did the history of the grandfather home, then I found out the little boy who lived there was actually a model for one of her short stories, and I got very interested in it. So this little book that I did myself, it's but the story behind A Mother in Manville, and it was a short story that was really based on truth, and the little boy was somebody grandfather home, so I got highly into that. And I've given 2 different reports, read papers at the Marjorie Rawlings Society in Florida because they were so interested in this. Writing books was a great joy for me and a good job. Barrett, though, was my #1 fan and supporter, and we have a tiny little guest room downstairs. It's 10 by 10. He put a double bed in there, and we slept for a whole year downstairs so that I could have an office upstairs to spread things out while doing the book. And in fact, with each of the books I wrote, he did all this accommodating for me. I just need to say that I couldn't have done it without him. I should probably mention that I did teach for 9 years at Lees McRae College as an adjunct, and there are absolutely no pictures of that, so I'm just mentioning that I enjoyed teaching. I found it's so much easier to teach in college than in elementary school. And Barrett and I, one time, this was his idea, but we delivered newspapers to newspaper stands at various places that have a newspaper stand around a huge area. And so we would go every week, pick up these weekly newspapers and take them and put them in these stands and collect the money and all that. And it was just a job. It was hard not to work, I guess. And Barrett really enjoyed that a lot more than I did. Well, for Barrett's 75th birthday, we had a 12-hour party, and we tried to include things that he loved. So we had a hike, and we had a picnic, and we had camp songs, all those things. And the lucky thing was that all of our children and all of our grandchildren at that time came. We were all together, and I didn't invite anybody else because I felt like it was just really a special time for Pod. We decided to retire when Barrett was 93 and I was 92. And
93.
Oh, did I say that?
Mhm.
Oh my gosh, stop! Okay, we retired in 1996 in January. So we'd been there almost 10 years and we loved it. We kept up with many of the things that, you know, blah, blah. So.
Okay.
Flowers are just very special to me. I hate to use that word. I'm going to take it off.
Okay, just start over.
What can I?
Beach. Beach.
We went to the beach a lot of times. When we bought our land, actually, we were planning to build an underground house. One time we went and took a whole week study at Mother Earth and learned how to build log-in houses. Actually, while we were in California on a trip, we went and studied how to do geodesic domes. So we were really looking for some way to build something that would, you know, be exciting to build and interesting to Barrett too, because he wanted to do something different.
Beach. Beach.
We went to the beach a lot of times. Oh, did I say that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, stop, stop. I guess having grandchildren is one of the most blessed things that ever happens to anybody. And we had 11, and each one was so special to us. We took some trips with some, we had visits from some, we took care of some, but watching you guys grow up has just been such a blessing. And you're still growing up, by the way. we had so many good trips throughout my life. I've just had wonderful times to travel. My parents believed and taught us that there was nothing more educational than a trip, even if it's down the road, getting out of your own place and seeing other people and other things. And I just can't say enough about my experiences in that kind of way.